I'm Caitlin Deneen, a tourism reporter here for the Orlando Sentinel. We're talking all things business with our special section, a 2016 forecast. We've been doing individual stories, looking at various things, real estate, transportation, and tourism. And today we're going to be looking at a few other topics. And, jobs and hiring will be mentioned specifically in some industry-focused topics in that special section. And we're joined here with Dr. Sean Snaith. He's the director of the University of Central Florida's Institute for Economic Competitiveness within the College of Business Administration, and he's a widely recognized economist in the fields of business and economic forecasting, the housing market, consumer issues, and federal economic policy. So, Dr. Snaith, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we're going to just dive right in. I'm going to toss it over to Paul Brinkman. He's a senior business reporter here.
Thanks. So obviously a big issue for the coming year, which we've all been tracking over the last year, is there's been some great job growth, declining unemployment, and let's just talk about, is that going to continue in 2016?
Well, I think we ended 2015 here in Florida with pretty good momentum. We'll get another jobs report at the end of the week for December, but October and November both added roughly 35,000 payroll jobs in each month. So that's a pretty rapid clip and much faster than the job growth that we're seeing nationally. When does that sort of translate into wages is the big question, because it really hasn't yet. And headline unemployment, both in Florida and nationally, are at 5%. I think historically that would be a level that means there's full employment in the labor market, and you would expect to see some faster wage and salary growth. But right now it's at 2.4, 2.5%. Which is historically not very high. So there's more going on, I think, in this cycle than has historically been the case.
Okay, so in terms of Florida and Orlando, which areas of the economy are we going to see more growth in, specifically with jobs, do you think?
Yeah, I think that Central Florida, the Orlando metro, is really the fastest growing of the large metros. Both in terms of job creation and population growth. Economic activity is really strong in Central Florida. Healthcare has been an important sector in our region's economy. Construction growth there is fairly high, not as high as I thought it would be at this point. The single-family housing market has not come back as quickly in terms of construction as I would have thought by this point in the recovery. Leisure and hospitality, that has been a real driver here in Central Florida's economy. I think it'll still be good growth, but I think it'll lose some momentum going forward. I'm a bit concerned about what's happening globally. And specifically in Brazil and Canada, and what that might mean for leisure and hospitality in Florida and here in Central Florida.
So can you pick any one of those areas that might see more wage pressure to increase pay? I think anywhere where you have rapid growth, that means the demand is there. So, I could see in healthcare and technology, these are some sectors where they may already be seeing some more rapid growth. It's not clear to me that it's necessarily happening in construction yet, although there is talk, anecdotal evidence of shortages of certain types of construction skills, and so that could start to bid up wages in that sector. Okay.
Excellent. And so transitioning from job growth and what sectors we think could increase. I know back in December, headlines were being made. We had the recent federal tax rate hike. Marco, I think you said it went from 0.25 to 0.5%. So, this is Marco Santana. He's a business reporter here. You cover several things, including banking and finance. So, what questions do you have?
Well, Sean, I think what the main thing that people will be concerned about is what does it mean for consumers to have this hike that was at the end of last year? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we just finished a discussion about wage and salary growth and how it's been lackluster in this recovery. And consumers right now nationally are sort of the bright spot of our economy. And that's not saying a heck of a lot, because we're not exactly spending like we did historically. Fourth quarter GDP growth is likely to be less than 1%. So we really sputtered nationally at the end of 2015, and I'll be anxious to see how consumers spent over the holiday shopping season. But I think low gas prices, it's nice to not have to put as much money in the tank, but as far as spending behavior, I think you'd be much more happier with a paycheck that was 5% more every time you collected it than saving some money on the gas. I think you're more willing to spend when you have a pay hike as opposed to these windfalls from low gas prices. It may or may not be very permanent. Sorry.
No.
So with that situation, now we see increases in taxes, and this is sort of reducing disposable income at a time when the consumer's not really spending as rapidly as we'd like to see. So, a lot of things are sort of converging right now that make me anxious, including the Fed raising interest rates, and then, sort of fiscal type policies that are contractionary as well, and then the whole global situation.
One of the things that's interesting about this hike is that it's the first one in about 8 years. And what that means is you have people in their early to mid-20s. This is the first time they're going to kind of go through this. I mean, do you have any suggestions? I mean, I talked to some experts, and some of them say don't panic. Others say, there is maybe a better environment to save a little more. I mean, what are your thoughts on just these people who are going through this kind of thing for the first time?
Yeah, I certainly, they have my sympathy. This has really been some historical period to come of age, given what's happened in housing and the economy, and now as we embark on this tightening cycle, it's always good to save. The power of compounding. That's what Google that. Because when you start saving younger, that just gives you a much larger nest egg when it comes time to retire. And I vaguely remember being young. And I know it's difficult to delay purchases when you're that age, to not go out, to not get the nice smartphone. But if you can stop that temptation and step away from it and just start to squirrel away a little more, I think in the long run you'll be much better off.
And it's interesting because they haven't had a tax rate hike in so long, and yet they're expected to go through about 2 or 3 more. This is what I've been hearing.
Well,
from the next
maybe.
year? Yeah.
I think the Fed, in terms of raising interest rates, will be very cautious. I think before we started 2016, the common wisdom was that the Fed would raise maybe 2 or 3 times in 2016. So end the year perhaps at 1%. I'm not so sure that that's the common wisdom at this point, given what's happening globally and given what's happened in our financial markets. The Fed will proceed with caution, and so I don't think we'll see 3 hikes. I think we might see 1 or 2 over the course of the year.
In addition to this last one in December.
Right. Yeah. So still interest rates are really low by historical standards, but this is an outlier. This is not how monetary policy was, when I was growing up. It's a different world.
When I was talking to some financial planners in the area, they said that they've seen an increase in just interest in doing this, from consumer interest in getting their finances kind of under control and kind of planning a little more. What do you attribute that to, the fact that there are more people kind of taking seemingly control of their finances?
Yeah, fear. Yeah. But what a motivator. Fear is a fantastic motivator. I don't know what the age of these folks that are seeking out advice, but what we went through in 2008 and that tremendous collapse in financial markets, then an equally tremendous bull market, fed in part by the Fed's zero interest rate policy. And now here we are again. The Dow's down, the worst start ever for the first trading week. So, people are seeking advice. What do you do? Where do you go? Is this, the new normal? Is it just going to always be this volatile? And it's an appropriate thing, but I'll repeat the advice I gave in 2008, and that when it comes to investment, don't make decisions with your emotions. Right. It's bad enough you have to make emotional decisions based on emotions, but financial decisions, you really want to try to separate those feelings from those decisions. Because if you think about it, people were scared in 2008, terrified as the stock market was collapsing.
Right.
Those people that sold and just said, I don't want to have anything to do with the stock market, they took all that loss, but then missed the tremendous bull market that would have recovered that wealth and then some. So again, it's better to get some solid advice, make a plan, and stick to it. Don't try to time the market.
Well, some people in real estate are saying, because of what's going on financially around to buy now and all that kind of stuff, and of course, real estate agents will agree with that. But what are your thoughts on that market and kind of how it's going to be affected this year?
I think that with the Fed starting to raise interest rates, eventually that's going to start to push up mortgage rates. And so I think there was a little bit towards the end of the year a surge in buying. People wanted to lock in these ultra low interest rates. I think that because of the economy, interest rates are not going to be rising very rapidly. Where if you don't lock in a mortgage now, you're going to pay 5% more by the end of the year. I don't think that's going to be the environment. I'm sure realtors don't want me to say that, but the real estate's pretty tight in Florida. There's a very limited inventory of existing homes out there, and because of that and the fact that construction has really been skewed towards multifamily rather than single family homes, and we've seen pretty rapid price appreciation here, I'd say, over the last half of 2015, double digit stuff,
Right.
which may have people flashing back to the housing bubble, but I don't think that's the case. I just think we've got really a situation where there's a genuine shortage that is boosting prices, not a shortage that is driven by speculative activity. Because the big difference between then and now is the ability to get mortgages. In 2005, you pretty much just needed a pulse and a pencil to fill out the application. Right. And you could get a $500,000 mortgage. Now it's tough, maybe too tough to get a mortgage because of all the financial regulation that has been put in place since the crisis. And so, I think we're not normal yet in housing. I think we need to see more construction in single family, and I think that pendulum of mortgage availability needs to swing somewhere more towards the center. We don't want to go back to 2004, 2005. That was insanity. But as tight as it is now, there's good credit-worthy borrowers that are unable to buy homes, whether they don't have the credit score or they can't come up with the down payment. But otherwise would be solid borrowers.
So let's require more than a pulse and a pencil this time.
A little bit more, I think so. But not your firstborn and
Right.
a pint of blood.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Well, and real estate and purchasing a house in any land, whether it's multi-unit, multi-family, or a single-family dwelling, that's only possible with solid financial footing and decent job pay. So, Paul, what kind of questions about that do you have?
Well, in terms of construction, I'd like to know, back to the Orlando market, is the construction sector in terms of jobs also boosted by the I-4 construction and the other big public projects that we have going on here?
Yeah, I mean, these are major projects, public
Right.
work projects, and so that that creates a significant amount of construction jobs.
Sure.
And these are long projects. They're not going to be done in 6 months.
Right.
Although I'm sure everyone driving I-4 would hope that's the case. So yeah, those create a lot of jobs in construction and for many years. Housing, I think at some point we're going to see the single family buildings start to pick up. And, it takes more construction workers to build a 100 single family home development than it does a 100 apartment complex. So, that will, once single family picks up, that will have sort of a larger effect on construction jobs.
Okay. And then jobs in general in Orlando, many here are trying to attract more high-paying jobs to the area. It's difficult to measure that sometimes and decide, is there success there? Are we moving the needle at all? How can we do that?
Well, I think you're correct that, political leadership and economic development folks were and still are making efforts to, what we would call diversify the economy.
Right.
I mean, we all know tourism is a backbone in our region's economy, and it's created a tremendous number of jobs, not just in tourism, because you got to remember, all those people visit Publix, all these people go
Right.
to the grocery store or visit their doctor or pay for daycare. So, what happens in tourism doesn't just stay there. So it ripples out and creates jobs elsewhere. But at the same time, if we have a specific shock to that sector, as was the case with 9/11, that suddenly
Right.
tourism just is hammered. Boy, we feel that disproportionately, and so I think that event really catalyzed policymakers movements towards, let's build jobs, and we got this great asset that most regions would kill to have, but let's develop some of our other economic muscles. And I think there's been real efforts, and I think success in doing so. I mean, if you drive over in the medical city, that really has occurred at a pace that you just don't see economic development occur typically. I mean, that was a cow pasture not that long ago, and this was even interrupted by the financial crisis and the recession. So, to see all that there, the UCF Medical School and Sanford Burnham and the VA hospital and the Moores, and then just the surrounding development, commercial and residential. I mean, there's just all kinds of building over there. So that there's been success there. And I think it's tough to, change the composition of your economy, especially when you've got this one big slice of the pie in tourism that, by the way, has been growing quite robustly over the past several years. So that muscle is getting larger, and so these other muscles, we're building them up, but it might not seem at first glance that progress is being made, but I do think there has been.
I did also want to, along those lines, you and I have talked about the impact of the Affordable Care Act on the economy here, particularly in the low-wage sector. Tell me what you think about that and how that's going to continue to play out.
Yeah, I've not been a big fan of what we did in terms of policy action in the wake of the Great Recession and financial crisis. I felt like we should really focus on getting the economy back, because that in and of itself would have been a major accomplishment. But we moved forward with very large pieces of legislation, the Affordable Care Act being one of them, and the Dodd-Frank Financial Regulatory Reform Law, neither of which, by the way, despite being passed over 5 years, has been fully implemented. We're still waiting for the rest of these laws to come down the mount, as it were. One concern that we've chatted about with the Affordable Care Act is this dichotomy, this distinction between full-time and part-time workers in the law. And for companies of a certain size, 50 employees and up, if you have an employee that works 30 hours or more, then you have to provide health care as mandated in the law and meeting the terms of the law. If you don't provide it, then you're fined. Mm-hmm. That same employee, if they work 29 hours, does not need to have health care provided, nor is there a fine assigned for not doing it. So that 1 hour, wow, what a difference in the cost of for that employee. And so, you're seeing, and we are seeing, I think, firms, try to do more with part-time workers. And so this whole underemployment issue, which is I think, a characteristic of this labor market that we haven't seen in other recoveries, at least to this extent. And I think that the Affordable Care Act is playing a role here.
Okay.
Well, I think that wraps it up for us here at the Orlando Sentinel. So, Dr. Snaith, thank you for coming in. We appreciate your time. And, guys, this was just a scratching of the surface of the work we've done for the 2016 CFB Business Forecast. And so click with theorlandosentinel.com, pick up that special section. But thank you for tuning in. So for orlandosentinel.com, I'm Caitlin Deneen.